This obviously does have an impact in terms of the number of services that are being made available, and how does your organization then remain relevant or indeed be creative about being able to get people to be able to access your funds. One of the issues, of course, in Fiji that we have found is the ability of credit unions to not just remain relevant, but also remain transparent. So you would have seen that the Reserve Bank at the moment is working through the wider financial inclusion program, that we are really looking at some of the laws that exist pertaining to credit unions. In Fiji, the Credit Union Act goes back to 1958, which is very, very old. So older than some of you over here in this room. But the point is that it does need to be revamped. We do need to be able to provide various facilities, and I completely agree with the President when she alluded to the fact about, having proper financial record-keeping mechanisms in place. And indeed, I think it is very, very critical. Yesterday, I just had a meeting with a group that's currently assessing Fiji in terms of our compliance with, say, money laundering. And they are carrying out a 2-week assessment. So as a modern nation state, we all need to be aware of the many factors that does affect the financial sector, and you are very much part of the financial sector. Unfortunately, I think, because of the neglect of the past, you now have a situation where, one could safely say the credit union movement and the credit union facilities has been very much left behind. And I think if they had been sort of brought on board much earlier on, you could have been very much part and parcel of the wider, credit facilities that's available to ordinary Fijians. And that is our purpose. And I think that our purpose is essentially through the various reforms or the assessments that's being carried out at the moment through the Reserve Bank of Fiji, that we do include credit unions into being mainstreamed. And I think that's very, very critical. In mainstreaming credit unions is very critical in terms of being able to offer a range of services to ordinary people in our country, and of course in your respective countries also. That, I think, ladies and gentlemen, is probably the key feature. We want to obviously work with the credit union movement in Fiji, because we see that as another facility. And in fact, as I was sitting down there, I was thinking, because as you know, we deliver our budget. For those of you who may not know, we always deliver our budget by, at least it has to be delivered before the end of November for the following year. So our budget will be delivered on the 6th of November for 2016. One of the areas that we are looking at in our budget is essentially to try and what we call embed some of the processes that have been neglected for a period of time, including financial inclusion, including also some of the financial reform. One of the critical issues, for example, we find at the moment is the Money Lending Act also. As you know, that money lenders in fact play a very, unfortunately to some extent, a very pivotal role in providing financial services. I've actually seen, ladies and gentlemen, footage of ATM machines where normally, for example, when the money hits your accounts, it hits your accounts around about 3 a.m. in the morning. So when you go up, Thursday morning, you wake up and you go and your pay is there. It hits around about 3 a.m. in the morning. You'll see around about 4 a.m. in the morning, a group of people, 2 or 3 people, will get off a car. They'll have this many ATM cards, and they'll have a book with all the PIN numbers of all the ATM cards. And these are the money lenders who actually, when you go and borrow money from them, most of them ask you for your ATM card, they ask you for your PIN number, and you give it to them. In fact, as you're actually breaching the terms and conditions of your ATM card. You're not supposed to give your PIN number to anybody. But anyway, they do give it, and this is why you have long queues in the bank. In the morning when you go, most of these people are queuing up, even though they have ATM cards, because of the fact they've given the cards to the money lender. So the money lender is actually taking out money from there. Now, some of the interest rates that are being charged are quite phenomenal. Now, that's another critical area, and I think that also will help your organization if we are able to regulate money lenders a lot better and have a lot more transparency in respect of that, because then people will be able to, access your type of facilities and other facilities a lot more easily. The other aspect I think that is also very critical is also to get the mainstream financial sector into appreciating the role that you do play. And I think that is very, very important for us. And we are trying to get also the mainstream financial organizations, traditionally the commercial banks, to understand more and be a lot more part and parcel of the growth areas. For us, ladies and gentlemen, our focus also going forward is on home ownership. It is very, very important to get home ownership rates up in Fiji. At least I can speak for Fiji. Because the reality is that many people do go to money lenders because they do not have an asset base. They cannot put anything up as collateral. So even if somebody may want to go to a bank and borrow $3,000 because of a death in the family, or there's a wedding, or they want to go away on a holiday because or visit a sick relative in Australia, New Zealand, wherever the case may be, and even though they have the ability to make the repayment, a lot of the commercial banks want some type of asset base to use as collateral. And the easiest form is to ensure that people have an asset base which is in terms of housing. We have amended the laws in Fiji about 18 months ago, where we have, for example, now you can have strata titling on land, on e-tauke land and also crown land. Those of you may not know, about 91% of all the land in Fiji is e-tauke land, or what you would call in Australia, native title. And previously, if you, for example, built flats, you could not individually sell the flats if it was on crown land or e-tauke land. Now the law does allow that. So what it does is does two things. It increases the value of e-tauke land, so an investor will come along and say, okay, I can put up a block of flats here and I will still get a good rate of return, because I can be able to sell those individual flats, to individuals. You can sell it off for $60,000, $70,000. At least they've got an asset base. The landowner benefits, but also you are now getting more people to own homes. That is the focus, and in fact we have already advertised for those type of propositions. So home ownership, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very critical. So in terms of, if you already have an asset base, if credit unions are able to provide a type of facility where people may want to furnish their homes, you provide those type of ancillary services where government may be providing what I call the bigger services. So at the moment in Fiji, if you are the first home buyer, we give you a $5,000 grant as long as you go through a mainstream bank. If you want to build your first home, we give you a $10,000 grant. And that actually is working well. We obviously want to do more, but we want to make more homes that are affordable available to the general public. I'm very keen, Madam President, to work with the organization, and also, of course, with the local branch of yours, because I sincerely do believe that we need to mainstream organizations like yours. You've provided a very critical service to Fiji, and maybe to a lesser extent, and of course in some countries, I note that the penetration rate, for example, in Australia is a lot higher than it is in Fiji. We obviously can learn from countries like Australia, but we also need to be able to mainstream you, and I'd like to do that, in particular in Fiji, and I'd like to get your feedback after your this Congress of yours as to how we can do that. But please do it quickly, because the budget books will close very soon. But I look forward to hearing from you, because I think it is very critical. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, I was at a constitutional forum last week, where one of the NGOs had invited a constitutional lawyer from Melbourne, Professor Cheryl Saunders. And generally we had a wider discussion. One of the critical issues, and I think most Pacific Islanders do not realize, and I suppose this is to a lesser extent applies to Australia and New Zealand, is that most Pacific Island countries are very small economies. Our economic base is very, very low in terms of our ability to spread our risk. Some of the countries in the Pacific, of course, the only resource they have is fish, the ability to give fishing licenses. We in Fiji are somewhat more fortunate. We have a wider base. Nonetheless, it is still a small base. So we have to be very mindful, even organizations like yours, in terms of what will, for example, regional agreements will have on your economies. What will, for example, recently there's all the big Pacific Rim countries just signed what they call the TPP. This is the kind of Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement regarding movement of trade, regarding movement of goods, within these big, larger countries. What impact will that have on us? What impact will that have on our revenue? Similarly, issues of climate change is very, very critical. It's not some, nice NGO type of thing. It is actually a very real issue. In Fiji, we have to actually move a number of villages over the next few years because they're actually going to be submerged. Some countries in the Pacific, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Marshall Islands, Tuvalu is only 12 feet above sea level. That's the highest point. In Fiji, Mount Victoria, which is about 4,000 feet. But imagine 12 feet above sea level. So these has huge ramifications in terms of how your organization in 10 years' time will be able to deal with the economic base that relates to your country. It is very critical to understand. In the same way, I know in the past couple of days, they've been having meetings with the Employment Relations Advisory Board. This is what we've been trying to impress upon the unions too. You have to be very mindful. Capital, ladies and gentlemen, is a very mobile thing. Just because somebody has a factory in Fiji doesn't mean they'll always stay here. If the conditions aren't right, they can move to Tonga, they can move to Samoa, they can move to Vanuatu, they can even move to Indonesia if they want to do that, and they start exporting to us, where at the moment we are the exporters. So it is very critical, I think, for all the players in the economy to understand, in particular in the Pacific. You need to have a long-term view. What is the role that is going to be played by trade unions, the credit unions, about government, about employees, about manufacturers, because you need to take a holistic approach to your particular economy. You need to take a holistic approach to the manner in which you provide financial services to your citizens. And I think if we are able to have that level of collaboration, but perhaps even before that, understanding as to what your actions can actually do or the ramifications of your actions, then I think it will be in a much better space. I thank you very much for your invitation, and my apologies for being a bit late, but I wish you all the best for your Congress, and I'm sure that we'll hear some very good things about it. Naka, thank you.